If you're looking to get into short stories, or just for a book with a huge emotional impact, or maybe just a short story collection that you can read to break up your regular reading routine, you can't go wrong with American Salvage by Bonnie Jo Campbell. It is absolutely remarkable in its rawness, and it will leave you a better person than when you started it. It's been quite a while since a short story collection has hit me like this. If you like Raymond Carver, you're gonna dig this book. She writes very similar to him, just with a bigger lens focused on poverty and a bigger lens focused definitely on methamphetamine abuse. I absolutely loved the impact that this book had on me. It put me in a blender of emotions all week long that I was reading this. I would oscillate between being sad, I'd be depressed. There's one story that had me feeling pretty inspired about humankind. My heart would break for some of these characters. Some of these characters I would root to get through the struggles that they had, and other characters I hoped they would get what they deserved. And all week long, I just felt like my heart was being ripped apart, put back together, ripped apart, put back together, like only great short fiction can really do. Most of the stories in this book are pretty short. The longest one is 28 pages long, I think. You really can bang out one or two of these a day, even if you are reading something else. Or if you want, you can bang out the whole book in an entire afternoon of the weekend. It's only about 150 pages long. One of the best ways to describe this book is to have you think back to when you were young. Remember when you would be hanging out with friends and maybe you were being kind of a jerk and you were kind of pushing your friend's buttons intentionally over and over again until finally your friend has it, snaps, and just punches you in the stomach? That's this book. This book hurts, but it's also the truth that you kind of needed to hear. Your friend needed to punch you, so you knew, hey, you've gone too far. That's the truth of the situation. This book hurts just the same, but it's truthful. These are the people lives. These are the people in our communities that are struggling to survive. And while it hurts to hear these stories, it's the truth, and we need to know them. In some cases, we are exploring people's fatal flaws. In other cases, we're exploring methamphetamine abuse and the shockwave effect that it has on a community and the people's lives surrounding you. All of these stories take place in Michigan, in a small town. I'm not entirely sure if it's the same small town in every story, but there's quite a few where the town is named and it is the same town every story. However, it's not just Michigan that could feel this. This is really any small town in America. If you live in a town where you have had industry and opportunity pass you by, you're going to connect with a lot of these characters and a lot of these stories. We have people just doing anything to survive, whether that is beating somebody up and hoping that they've got money on them, or whether it is somebody contemplating drinking antifreeze a second time. Yes, sadly, it is a second time, as they've just been released from the hospital for the first attempt. But every story in here, we are dealing with people trying to overcome the tragedy and the traumas of their lives. What you'll love about this short story collection is that every story in this is thought-provoking. Campbell doesn't just tell you a quick plot with an interesting twist. She really is delving into the psyche of every character that we meet within the stories. There's characters who are wrestling with their own guilt. There's characters wrestling with their perceived weaknesses and the weaknesses others perceive within them. And she does it all in a way that I wouldn't say she doesn't do it delicately. She's not handling them like with kid gloves, but she does it in such a non-judgmental way. Almost everyone that you meet in this book is impoverished, but you don't get the sense that Campbell is judging any of her characters. Even when she's writing about some absolutely wicked people, she's not judging them in their wickedness. She's simply just telling the truth of the matter for those characters from all characters' point of views. And I'll touch on this a little bit later in the video. After every story, I would sit there and think about the characters and the situations that got them to where they ended. I'd think about their motivations. You would think about what turn of events got them there, how I would have handled the situation, would I have handled any differently. And it really made me think about who I am, and it had me get to know myself better. And it also helped me just to kind of learn about the people around me and the world around me. There wasn't a single story in this collection where I was just like, okay, story's done, let's get on to the next one. Every single one was kind of a deep, thought-provoking story, and that's pretty rare for me to find in a short story collection. I'll mention Raven Carver again. He's really the only other one where I have read an entire collection of stories and every time been like, wow, let's kind of sit with this. Let's think about this before moving on to the next one. Usually a collection will have, at least one or two stories that didn't quite hit for you. That's not the case with American Salvage. Usually I highlight the first sentence of a book and I start looking at it and trying to figure out what the author is trying to plant in me for seeds, for plot points and characterization and themes and the minutia like that. You can't really do that with a short story collection. I could take the first line of the first story, but that's not really indicative to the entire book, especially so when a lot of short stories are written for different publications and then compiled into a collection later on. So today what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to talk about 5 of the different stories in the book, and I will talk about some of the themes within them. So be forewarned, there are spoilers for the next 5 stories I talk about. If you don't want any spoilers, I'd suggest stopping here. If you can handle some slight spoilers on this, continue on. I'm not giving away endings, but it is going to tell you where some stories may lead. So you've been warned. Okay, so let's start talking about them. The first story in the book is The Trespasser, and it is an absolutely banger of a way to start this collection. It's the story of a mom, a dad, and their teenage daughter going to their summer camp for the first time that summer. And these are probably the only people in the entire book who seem to have any sort of money, presumably because they own a second camp and they have a house somewhere that they live in normally. It is only 4 pages long, and still it has what my money says is the best ending of all of her stories. And it is insane that within the brevity of this, it's 4 pages long. It's probably the second shortest, maybe the shortest story in this book, and it has the best ending. And that really speaks to Bonnie Jo Campbell's ability that you can write something so short and have such an impactful ending. And that's when I realized, like, hey, I think I'm in for an amazing ride here. I think I have found an amazing book. And if she can do this in 4 pages, like, what is she going to do when I start getting into some of the longer ones? There is a character who has a somewhat unresolved finish in this story, and originally I kind of wished I knew more about what happened there. After reading more and after thinking about The Trespasser, I thought, you know what? I think it's better that it is left open-ended. I know where Bonnie Jo Campbell probably would have had things go for this character. However, I can have a little bit of hope here, and I can dream that maybe she gets a better ending than what Bonnie Jo Campbell would have given her. It definitely makes me think that maybe there is a second part of the story, or maybe she's written another book about this character because it is left so open-ended, but such a unique aspect of it. So I'm excited to dive in to see if there is anything like that, but I kind of like having my own story for her and thinking that maybe she got a good start here somewhere. The second story I want to highlight is The Inventor 1972. It's the story of a girl who's walking to school in the morning when she is hit by a car and is kind of laying there in the snow with at least a broken leg and not sure if she's going to live or die. The driver gets out, and the driver is a horribly disfigured man who also happens to have a speech impediment because of the disfiguration that he has. So he's trying to talk to her, and she's getting more freaked out by this hideous guy, and eventually he leaves her to try to find some help. As he's running away to find some help, he's thinking about how this girl reminds him of a friend of his from high school who had passed away, and he can't figure out why she's reminding him so much of his friend from high school. He starts knocking on doors, and people are freaked out. There is this hideously disfigured man who is screaming unintelligible, and nobody wants to let him in so he can call help. So this tension just keeps getting ratcheted up. You're seeing him reaching out for help and nobody giving it to him. She's continually having these thoughts of her uncle who had passed away, and she's trying to stay alive while she's laying there not knowing if help is ever going to come. And the tension just keeps rattling up and rattling up. And then it just breaks in this absolutely beautiful way. And you spend a lot of this story going between who's really the victim here, and yes, they're both victims, but it's not just the victim of her. You bounce back and forth between her being hit by this man and then him just being victimized by society and shunning away from him when all he's trying to do is help somebody. And like I said, it has a beautiful, beautiful ending that is really bittersweet, and I don't know if there's another story in this book that really matches the ending of bittersweetness that this one has. Third story I wanted to talk about is The Burn. And maybe it's because I read this story the same week that the United States government has decided to pass legislation that's going to strip millions of people of healthcare and strip millions and millions of dollars from rural hospitals, but it made it hit that much harder. And I know what you're saying. There's people out there saying, some people don't need healthcare, or, you don't need a hospital in every town. And to which I say, read this story and tell me that that's the case. This is the story of seemingly innocuous situations that compound on each other that lead this guy to get a really serious burn. And he is unable to pay for the healthcare, and he goes against doctor's orders and removes himself from the hospital. He gets home and he has nobody around him. He's got nobody that can help him care for this wound. And he is left to try to find help from the only people who come around. And it starts forcing him to confront the hatred that he has, and he has to look at the hatred that he has for women, look at the hatred that he has for Black people, look at the hatred he has for the lesbian couple that lives up above him. And he starts looking at this toxic masculinity within him and the people that he works with, and trying to figure out whether or not he believes in this hatred anymore, or if he's starting to kind of see the error of all of that. And you're left wondering whether or not is he truly changing because he sees the error of his ways, or is he only changing because these are the people who are around him, and he knows that if he needs help, he can't just be openly bigoted towards them. It's a really interesting concept and a really greatly well done story. Bringing Belle Home is maybe the heaviest story in this book. It's about a man who is at a bar when he sees his wife, who's been kind of staying some other places the past couple of weeks, and trying to get her to come home. And when she has some pushback on that, the violence that erupts from him towards her. And we quickly learn kind of the history of this couple and their relationship from when they were teenagers to them now in their mid-40s. And we see it through both of their eyes. And it deals a lot with when she was a teenager, she was getting abused heavily by her father, and he lived next door and could hear it, and he wished that he could protect her and help her and stop her dad from beating her. And he deals a lot with this guilt that he was unable to stop this until she moved out. And she views this situation in an entirely different way. And while it is like no bones about it, like he's a vile, wicked man, he is abusing his wife in public, no qualms about doing this, talking, like having conversations with people around him while he's doing this. We do see like when his wife mentions how she sees him and how has seen him since they were teenagers, and the disconnect of what he thought was true versus her true, and how that breaks him was just a fascinating look, again, at that toxic masculinity that people have, and just his heart breaking over what he thought was true not being the case. And it was heartbreaking and it was sad, and you empathize with this character despite the fact that he is an absolutely wicked human. The last story I wanted to highlight comes towards the back end of the book, and it's Storm Warning. It's the story of a man and his girlfriend on a boating trip with another couple, and he's driving the boat contemplating whether or not he could love this girl. And while he's thinking this over, while also checking out some of the girls on the beach, he crashes the boat. And his girlfriend has to save him, and it turns out that he is paralyzed after this accident from the waist down. The doctors do say he will make a pretty full recovery, but it's probably going to take 6 months or so for him to learn how to walk again. They release him from the hospital and they go home, and he is in the bed, and his girlfriend is left to take care of him, and he has to wrestle with the guilt of causing this accident, the guilt he has of having somebody have to take care of him, and his head is just swimming in all of these emotions, and this anger he has at himself for causing this, the anger he has for making her have to do this, and he is just not capable of handling these feelings in any sort of rational way. An argument soon breaks out, and he tells his girlfriend to leave. So his girlfriend storms off, and he is left in the bed, unable to move from anything but the waist up, as a hurricane starts to come. And he is just, like I said, swimming in his head with the guilt that he feels, and again, toxic masculinity that he feels of having to have this girl take care of him, and also like having to have her be the one that has saved him, and whether or not he can get out of his own way and love her. And he keeps telling himself he does, and I think deep down he really does love her. He's just incapable of being able to express that in a healthy way. So whenever she comes around, he's just lashing out from the anger that he has at himself. And it's this give and take, and this, like I've said in kind of the other stories I've talked about, there's this give and take in a lot of these stories of can he come around or not? And can he truly allow himself to love someone, and what it means to let someone love you? And it ends with a open-ended ending that can be kind of taken one way or the other. There you have it. All in all, American Salvage is a fantastic book, and I am a better person for having read this book. I never would have heard of this book if it wasn't for Carl over at Please Read Your Book. He has recommended this book and sung its praises for quite a while now. He had it in a tier list ranking video of some crime fiction books that he had read, and he had it high up on the list there. He also had a couple other listicle videos where he mentioned this book and talked about how incredible it was and how more people had to read it, which really makes Carl closing down his YouTube channel that much more sadder. Carl served an underutilized and underrepresented niche of BookTube. He was one of the few channels I was ever able to find that consistently talked about crime fiction and talked about noir and rural noir and southern fiction and thrillers on a consistent basis. Yes, there's people out there who will cover the It summer book, and then they'll move on to their regular scheduled program. But Carl is one of the few who consistently talked about crime fiction and would prop up under-known books like American Salvage. So him closing his channel down is a huge disservice to YouTube, and I get why he did it. I understand 100% why, and I back him on that. But we're really worse off for having him off the platform. And I know that I'll miss Carl's videos, and I'll miss his insight, and I'll miss his input, and I really thought that this was going to be a place of positivity and unity, and I'm really, really sad that that wasn't the experience that Carl was able to get.